What happens when the brightest star in Hollywood suddenly finds herself behind bars, trading red carpets for prison uniforms and champagne toasts for meals served through metal slots? Before we dive deep into this absolutely shocking true story that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about fame, fortune, and the dark side of the entertainment industry, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this channel brings you the most incredible real-life stories that are stranger than any fiction. And trust me when I say you absolutely need to watch this entire video, because the final twist in this tale is so unbelievable that it will completely change how you view celebrity culture forever. Isabella Rodriguez was the kind of actress that Hollywood dreams are made of, possessing the rare combination of stunning beauty, raw talent, and that indefinable quality that makes audiences fall in love with someone the moment they appear on screen. Her journey began in the dusty streets of a small New Mexico town, where the most exciting event was the annual Chili Festival, and the biggest building was a 3-story courthouse that had seen better days decades ago. Growing up as the daughter of a house cleaner and a mechanic, Isabella learned early that if she wanted something better than the life of quiet desperation that surrounded her childhood home, she would have to fight for it with every fiber of her being. Spending countless hours in front of a cracked mirror in her tiny bedroom, practicing monologues from movies she'd watched on an old television that required a coat hanger antenna to pick up even the most basic channels. At 17, armed with nothing more than a high school diploma, 2 suitcases filled with thrift store clothes, and the kind of burning ambition that could power a small city, Isabella convinced her reluctant parents to let her move to Los Angeles, where she survived her first year by working double shifts at a 24-hour diner in Hollywood, serving coffee to aspiring actors and late-night partygoers while memorizing scripts between orders of eggs and hash browns. The rejection letters piled up like autumn leaves, each one a small dagger to her confidence, but Isabella possessed the kind of resilience that turns coal into diamonds under pressure, and after 18 months of auditions that went nowhere and callbacks that led to dead ends, she finally landed a small role in an independent film that paid her exactly $300 for 2 weeks of work, but gave her the first professional credit that would eventually change her life forever. Word travels fast in Hollywood when someone has genuine talent, and Isabella's brief but memorable performance as a grieving sister caught the attention of casting directors who began calling her in for bigger roles, each one paying a little more money and giving her slightly more screen time, building her reputation one small part at a time, until she was no longer the unknown girl from New Mexico, but a rising star that industry insiders whispered about in the hallways of major studios. The breakthrough came when she was 23, landing the female lead in a romantic drama opposite one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, a role that required her to dig deep into emotional territory she had never explored before, drawing on memories of loss and heartbreak that she had spent years trying to forget, but which now became the fuel for a performance that critics would later describe as nothing short of magnificent. The film grossed over $200 million worldwide and earned Isabella her first Academy Award nomination, transforming her overnight from a working actress into a genuine movie star whose face appeared on magazine covers from New York to Tokyo, and whose every public appearance generated the kind of media frenzy usually reserved for royalty or pop music superstars. With fame came fortune on a scale that Isabella had never imagined possible, her salary jumping from thousands to millions per film, and with that money came a lifestyle that seemed like something out of a fairy tale, complete with a sprawling mansion in the Hollywood Hills, a collection of luxury cars that most people only see in magazines, and a social circle that included some of the most famous and influential people in the entertainment industry. The parties were legendary, hosted in palatial homes where champagne flowed like water and guest lists read like the credits of major motion pictures, Events where business deals worth millions of dollars were negotiated over cocktails and handshakes, and where Isabella found herself moving through crowds of celebrities, directors, producers, and power brokers who all wanted to be associated with Hollywood's newest golden girl. Money has a way of attracting people who promise to make even more money, and Isabella soon found herself surrounded by a team of financial advisors, investment managers, and business consultants who spoke in complex terms about diversified portfolios, tax shelters, and opportunities that could multiply her wealth exponentially if she was smart enough to trust their expertise. Chen presented Isabella with charts and graphs that showed projected returns so impressive they seemed almost too good to be true. But when you're making $20 million per movie and living in a world where excess is not just accepted, but expected, numbers that big don't seem impossible. They seem like the natural progression of success building upon itself. For 4 years, Isabella watched her investment statements show returns that consistently outperformed the stock market, and Chen regularly wired money to her personal accounts to prove that his strategies were working exactly as promised, never mentioning that the money he was sending her was actually coming from new investors rather than legitimate profits from the ventures he claimed to be managing on her behalf. The federal investigation began quietly in the offices of the Securities and Exchange Commission, where analysts noticed unusual patterns in the financial records of several high-profile investment firms, discrepancies that suggested money was being moved in ways that didn't match the legitimate business activities these companies claimed to be conducting, launching an investigation that would eventually uncover one of the largest Ponzi schemes in entertainment industry history. Isabella first learned something was wrong when her accountant called with news that the IRS was questioning several large deposits in her accounts, transactions that Chen had assured her were perfectly legal tax-optimized investment returns, but which government investigators now claimed were actually proceeds from fraudulent activities that made her an unwitting participant in federal crimes. The phone call that changed everything came on a Thursday morning while Isabella was having breakfast on the terrace of her Beverly Hills home, her lawyer explaining in careful, measured tones that federal agents were preparing to arrest David Chen and several of his associates, and that she needed to come to his office immediately to discuss the very real possibility that she would be charged as a co-conspirator in the scheme, regardless of whether she had knowledge of its criminal nature. Within hours, Isabella found herself sitting in a conference room surrounded by lawyers who explained that under federal law, ignorance of criminal activity is not always a defense, especially when that ignorance could be considered willful blindness to obvious red flags that any reasonable person should have recognized, such as investment returns that consistently exceeded industry standards by margins that defied logical explanation. The media explosion after Chen's arrest was unlike anything Isabella had experienced, even during her most successful film premieres. With news trucks lined up outside her home like an invading army, helicopters circling overhead with cameras trained on her windows, and reporters shouting questions about her involvement in the scheme every time she tried to leave her property, treating her like a criminal rather than the victim her lawyers insisted she truly was. Her publicist quit within 24 hours, followed quickly by her agent, her manager, and most of the people who had been eager to take their percentage of her earnings when she was one of Hollywood's most sought-after actresses, but who suddenly found themselves too busy to return her calls now that association with her name could damage their own careers and reputations. The grand jury indictment came 6 months later, charging Isabella with conspiracy to commit securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice for allegedly deleting emails and text messages that investigators claimed contained evidence of her knowledge about the illegal nature of Chen's investment scheme, accusations that carried potential prison sentences totaling up to 35 years in federal custody. Her legal team, costing her nearly $50,000 per week, argued that she had been a victim rather than a perpetrator, pointing to evidence that showed she had asked Chen numerous questions about the legitimacy of his investments and had been consistently reassured that everything was completely legal and above board. But prosecutors painted a picture of willful ignorance and greed that made her complicit in crimes that had cost other investors over $200 million.
The trial became a media spectacle that dominated entertainment news for 8 months, with every day bringing new revelations about Isabella's financial dealings, her lifestyle choices, and her relationship with Chen, details that were dissected by television pundits and social media commentators who treated her personal tragedy like entertainment designed for their consumption and judgment. Expert witnesses testified about complex financial instruments and investment strategies that most jurors struggled to understand, while Isabella's former friends and colleagues took the stand to describe conversations and interactions that prosecutors claimed proved she had knowledge of the fraudulent nature of Chen's operations, testimonies that painted her as either hopelessly naive or deliberately deceptive, depending on which version of events seemed more convincing. After 3 weeks of testimony and 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned a mixed verdict, finding Isabella guilty of money laundering and conspiracy charges, but innocent of obstruction
of justice, a result that her lawyers described as a partial victory, but which still carried a potential sentence of up to 15 years in federal prison, effectively ending the career and lifestyle she had spent her entire adult life building. The sentencing hearing 3 months later drew hundreds of supporters who gathered outside the courthouse to show their belief in Isabella's innocence, while inside, her legal team presented character witnesses and evidence of her charitable work in an attempt to convince the judge that she deserved the minimum possible sentence, arguing that she had been manipulated by sophisticated criminals who had taken advantage of her trust and inexperience with complex financial matters. The judge, acknowledging that Isabella had no prior criminal record and appeared to have been genuinely deceived by Chen's scheme, sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 5 years, a punishment that was both more lenient than prosecutors had requested and more severe than her supporters had hoped for, representing a compromise that satisfied no one completely but reflected the complex nature of her crimes and circumstances. Walking through the gates of the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, Isabella experienced culture shock that no amount of method acting training could have prepared her for, trading her designer clothes for a standard issue uniform, her privacy for a shared cell with a woman convicted of armed robbery, and her freedom for a highly regimented schedule that dictated every moment of her day, from 5:30 morning wake-up call to 10 o'clock lights out. The other inmates initially viewed her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, some fascinated by the presence of a genuine movie star in their midst, others resentful for what they perceived as her privileged background and convinced that her wealth and fame would somehow buy her preferential treatment from guards and administrators who seemed unlikely to be impressed by Hollywood credentials. Prison life stripped away all the pretenses and luxuries that had defined Isabella's existence for nearly a decade, forcing her to confront not only the reality of her situation, but also the person she had become during her years of success, someone who had been so focused on maintaining her career and lifestyle that she had abdicated responsibility for understanding how her money was being managed and where it was coming from. The daily routine of prison became a form of meditation, the simplicity of making her bed, eating meals at scheduled times, and working in the prison laundry, forcing her to slow down and reflect in ways she hadn't done since her struggling actress days when every day was a battle for survival. But now the battle was for her soul and her sense of self-worth rather than her next meal or rent payment. During her incarceration, Isabella began tutoring other inmates who were working toward their high school equivalency diplomas, discovering a passion for teaching and mentoring that had been buried under years of red carpet appearances and movie premieres, finding that helping someone else learn to read or understand basic mathematics provided a satisfaction that was entirely different from the adrenaline rush of performing in front of cameras or receiving standing ovations from audiences of thousands. She also started a creative writing program that encouraged inmates to express their thoughts and experiences through poetry and short stories, creating a space where women who had been defined by their worst decisions could explore other aspects of their identities and begin to imagine different futures for themselves once their sentences were completed. Work that gave Isabella a sense of purpose she had never experienced during her Hollywood career. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy, requiring her to confront the ways she had allowed others to make important decisions about her life and money while she focused exclusively on her career. But gradually, she began to understand that her willful ignorance about her finances wasn't just a personal failing, but a betrayal of the trust that other victims of Chen's scheme had placed in the investment system she had helped legitimize through her participation. Letters from fans around the world arrived weekly, some expressing support and belief in her innocence, others sharing their own stories of financial fraud and betrayal, creating connections that helped Isabella understand that her experience was part of a much larger pattern of exploitation that targeted not just celebrities, but ordinary people who trusted the wrong advisors with their life savings and retirement funds. After serving 6 years of her 8-year sentence, Isabella was released on parole to a world that had largely moved on without her, new stars occupying the magazine covers and red carpets she had once dominated, her former mansions sold to pay legal fees and victim restitution, and her Hollywood career effectively over, because the entertainment industry, despite its reputation for forgiveness and comebacks, rarely welcomes back performers who have served significant prison time for financial crimes. Instead of attempting to resurrect her acting career or wallowing in self-pity about everything she had lost, Isabella chose to dedicate her remaining years to financial literacy education and fraud prevention, using her experience and hard-won wisdom to help others avoid the mistakes that had cost her everything she thought she needed to be happy, speaking at colleges, community centers, and conferences about the importance of understanding where your money goes and the red flags that indicate potential investment fraud. She started a nonprofit organization called Second Chance Financial Education that provides free workshops for people who have been victims of financial crimes, as well as programs that teach basic money management skills to formerly incarcerated individuals who are trying to rebuild their lives after prison. Work that has helped hundreds of people avoid the pitfalls that destroyed her own financial security and personal freedom. Today, 15 years after her arrest and 9 years after her release from prison, Isabella lives in a modest apartment in Denver, Colorado, works full-time for her nonprofit organization, and has found a peace and contentment that all the money and fame in the world could never provide, proving that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters in life, and that the most important role she ever played wasn't in front of a camera, but in the real world, where second chances are earned through genuine remorse, hard work, and a commitment to helping others learn from the mistakes that cost her everything she thought she needed to be happy.
Transforming a story of spectacular fall from grace into one of redemption, purpose, and the recognition that true wealth lies not in bank accounts or investment portfolios, but in the relationships we build and the positive impact we have on the lives of others.